Hey, I'm Sasan Kasravi with Proteus Debate Academy. We make free stuff for you. So tell us what you want to see. I actually just recorded this video that you're watching earlier. But I have a new setup. I was really proud of it. You can see me brag about it a little bit because I got rid of the lag issues. I now make it so I don't have to do video editing. I can just get it all in one go and everything is good. But I made a mistake in the first couple minutes. Didn't have my sound being recorded. So this is now going in the beginning. I'm going to have to do the video editing. But in the future, hopefully these issues won't exist. Hey, what are you looking at right now? What is this? Who am I? Well, on the topic of us making stuff that you ask us to do, people, someone, Bill Liu, I want to say, suggested that we do some topic analyses in the future, which I'm happy to do. But what I thought would be cool is to go through all of the proposed upcoming topics for public forum and break down how I see each one. I think the first couple topic areas I kind of knew that the topics, what they were. The later ones I hadn't read at all. And so there's a couple ways that you can get utility out of this video. The first is getting a preview of what kind of arguments you will likely be making or other people might likely be making on these issues. Another way of using this video is to inform your decision in which of the topics you're going to vote for when you have an option. You can vote however you want. I'm not really doing the video from the perspective of this is the better topic, this is the worst topic. More from the perspective of what I think makes for a better debate. And I'll explain that as I'm talking about each thing. And lastly, in evidentiary debate, like public forum or like Lincoln Douglas, you have long topics over many tournaments, and each round is the same topic and over and over and over again. That's really good in a lot of ways, but you end up seeing very few topics across your debate career. Whereas in something like parliamentary debate that I competed in and I coach now, you would get the number of topics you get in a year. I think I even talk about this in the part you're going to hear. You get a lot of topics. So one of the benefits of this video, I think, is that you get to see kind of how I see a topic in the first couple minutes of looking at it, how I digest it, where I go from there, how I approach it. And I think that is a useful skill to develop. And I'm going to transition now to me being super glad about my new setup, clueless that the last few minutes had not been recorded with sound. As I'm going through these, and you see that happened in real time. That was live. This is not video editing. I'm starting to learn how to use these programs. Here's what I'm considering. And to be honest with you, I'm not even sure that this is everything I'm considering because I just kind of wrote this out. I thought it'd be helpful. This is generally like a part of the process in the college parley world where you get 20 minutes to write a case, which means you get 3 to 5 minutes to come up with a plain text. Ideally 3. So what am I looking for? Well, as the AF, I'm looking to see whether there's any specific proposals already in place and whether stuff like this has happened before, because that's going to be really useful for arguments. I have to consider whether the negative is running a counterplan and then what my big advantage is going to be. What's a great impact to talk about in the parley world very quickly, but in other forms of debate, kind of as you go, you start to form impacts that you just like to talk about. And I'm not talking about being a K debater, like, this is my project, this is the thing I'm going to talk about. It's just, with any given issue, there's lots of ways of examining whether we should do it, like what effects it has. And looking, for example, you could take any issue and look at the environmental impact it has or the economic impact it has. And those, if you know that's an impact that you know a lot about, you like to talk about, a lot of topic like analysis and a lot of case writing is just finding the link between the topic and the impacts that you want to talk about. And there's only so many impacts that are that viable. There's the cliche of like nuclear war or whatever, but there's a reason people make those arguments a lot because they're not very good at impact comparison. So they're just going to go for an impact so big they don't have to justify it. On the negative, I'm going to be looking at, can I defend the status quo? If I can, then I'm going to need a big DA, and I need to know what that is. And if I can't, then I'm going to need a counterplan. So I'm going to look to see whether there's any specific proposed alternatives, and if there's not, I'm going to start looking at, okay, based on this topic, what must the affirmative defend, and thus, is there something outside of that that would make it so that I'm basically getting out of a perm. Now, a lot of you are watching this thinking, hey, Sasan, there's no counterplans in public forum. But that's not really true. There's a rule that says you don't have plans or counterplans. But that rule also very specifically says that the affirmative is allowed to have a general advocacy. Well, it says both sides are allowed to have a general advocacy. So a negative can't have a counterplan in the same way that the affirmative can't have a plan. Meaning they can't say, oh, we should do this in this particular time using these specific people in this particular way and not do these 5 factors of it, but just focus on this one issue. That is what they are talking about and what they're trying to avoid in writing that rule. But there's nothing that says the affirmative can't say, hey, we generally advocate for this version of doing it. If you have a disadvantage about some other way of doing it, then you can make that argument. But generally, this is the affirmative's advocacy. The negative gets to have an advocacy as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing anywhere that says the negative has to defend the status quo. And that rule could very easily be written if people want it to be written. Whatever. That's the point, right? Now, ideally, we don't want to have to run a counterplan or a counterplan-esque thing. A counterplan, you can watch the video I made on it pretty recently, is effective, but it's never the ace strat, right? It's very risky, and in public forum especially, it doesn't matter if the rules can technically allow for you to run a counterplan or advocate for an alternative if all that's going to do is make every debate about you having to defend that technically you're allowed to do this. That's going to lose you a lot of debates in front of a lot of judges. Maybe not like a super techie judge or whatever, but we want to avoid it if we can. But if the topic is like, I don't know, end the war on drugs, like, we don't want to be like, war on drugs good. Let's take a look at these topics. I have them right over here. Okay. Septober. Topic area is Europe. Option A. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization should substantially increase its defense commitments to the Baltic states. Versus, the United States should substantially increase its economic engagement with Western Balkans. In the Western Balkans. Okay. Let's talk about the first one. Just looking at the topic in terms of how it's phrased and like topicality issues and stuff like that. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Great. We have a concrete actor. And that concrete actor comes with a set of rules. NATO has rules it must follow and procedures it must follow and has followed. So it's a lot more concrete, like what kind of actions, like what the sort of borders around the kind of action that we could talk about are. Should substantially increase it? Let's talk about substantially. Substantially is a word we put in resolutions so that people can't get away with doing some tiny incremental change, saying you don't have a big disadvantage to that specific incremental change, and if it's an improvement, then vote for me. That really only works in like plan-driven formats of debate, because here you can have a disadvantage regardless of what the affirmative's advocacy is. The word substantially generally is there so that if your affirmative is too small, the negative has grounds to run topicality, because you can no longer say, well, I'm topical, you said increase this, and I increased it by 7 cents or some shit. Okay. Increase its defense commitments. Defense commitments could mean a few different things. That could mean a mutual defense treaty. NATO is a mutual defense organization, which is kind of the point of it. So I would imagine that there'd be pretty good leeway for teams to say, hey, that's what we're really talking about. But the resolution doesn't say that, and it doesn't say that on purpose. This might be a good time to mention that the next interview I'm hoping to do, I'm trying to find someone in this group who will talk to me, is I want to do an interview with the Public Forum Topic Writing Committee and just talk about how do you land on these topics? How do you land on the phrasing of these topics? And if you know someone or you are someone involved, let me know. Paul knows a couple people who happen to be on there. I reached out to the co-chairs of the committee on Facebook, but we're not like friends, so they probably didn't even see my message. Anyway, Baltic states. That's pretty concrete. That's like Lithuania, Romania, and I don't know, one other, where Dracula lives. Okay. What do I think about this? Well, let's take a look at it from the affirmative's perspective so far. Is there a specific proposal in place to do the affirmative? Let's find out. NATO increase defense of Baltics. I mean, Rand is saying let's say proposal. See, the tricky thing is that there has to be a proposal, but it has to not be in the status quo. So, for example, NATO puts defense plan for Baltics into action. At status quo, you're not increasing it then. And probably a big part of this topic is understanding what the current defense commitments are. My guess is that, I mean, I would research it way more if I was actually like writing a case on this, right? But my guess is that there is not a clear-cut proposal in the same way there would be if it was like the United States should adopt a single-payer healthcare system. It's like, okay, we have Medicare for all, right? That's a specific proposal, a specific bill that exists. And if we were writing a plan, we'd say our AF has passed this law. In a very cursory glance, it doesn't seem to have that. That doesn't bode super well for the negative. Or the affirmative. It just makes the debate a little bit... it makes it harder for the affirmative to find clear evidence. And it makes it harder for the negative to predict what the affirmative is going to run. With that said, let's take a look. What else do we got? What's the precedence? There's pretty strong precedence here because NATO exists, and NATO There's lots of European countries that are in NATO. There's lots of European countries that weren't in NATO but got added to NATO. And we can pretty clearly see, we can easily test links, right? We can be like, hey, what was it like before someone joined NATO compared to after? What changed? Are those situations similar enough for us to say that this same change will happen again? Whether that's a positive or negative test, right? That's just how clear will links be under this topic. Seems pretty good. Is the negative running a counterplan? No. The negative here is not running a counterplan for two reasons. One, because the status quo isn't horrible. The status quo is probably defensible. There was like a meme posted on the debate subreddit a few days ago, I think, and it was like, United States, Russia won't attack the Baltics, and it autocorrect like, do you mean Russia will attack the Baltics? And I was like, oh shit, they're gonna attack the Baltics. But even in the meme, if you actually read the little excerpt from the article, it was like, there is no reason to think that Russia is going to invade the Baltics because of blah blah blah. I didn't read it, but seems to me like it's not a foregone conclusion that the lives of everyone in the Baltics is immediately in danger. So seems like it's not a counterplan debate. So at that point, what's the affirmative going for? Well, probably econ. The obvious argument is, you know, like security from Russia or blah, 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 right? And the fact of the matter is that the negative is going to have just as many arguments on the other side. And public forum, from my understanding of it, from what I've seen, from the people I've talked to, from the rounds I've watched, is not a good format for resolving link debates. And what I mean by that is like resolving, this thing will happen, this thing won't happen. All the rounds I watch are just like, we say this thing will happen and they say that thing will happen, and we have no real mechanism of resolving which is more likely to happen, so let's just jump immediately to the impacts. Yeah, it's not really like, you're not quoting the, I don't know. It's just, there's just not as much line by line and carded evidence and back and forth, and especially since there's no plan text, so you're gonna find someone saying like, under these circumstances this would happen, and you find somebody else that says under these circumstances this would happen, but both circumstances are topical, so we're like, how do we know which is more likely to happen? So obviously you need the Russia war scenario arguments, but what either side wants is a clear impact that only they have unique access to. For the AF, the easy one is probably econ, and you could probably argue that from a perspective of business confidence and say, hey, like, businesses not having to worry about Russia will increase the foreign investment and stuff like that, and business confidence, because people won't have to worry about it turning into a war zone, and they'll be more likely to invest in the area, and that will be good for it. On the negative, why should we not? I mean, you're going to have to go pretty hard for some sort of Russia backlash type of thing. Maybe there's some sort of trade stuff. That's what I would look into. But the biggest thing I would look into is whether somebody else that's in NATO is going to throw a hissy fit. And I think compromising the efficacy of NATO is going to be a really effective argument if you can get there, because it's going to turn pretty much all of the affirmative, because it's going to make the scenario they're discussing happening in the Baltics probably happen in Europe, all over Europe. So I don't know. It's Finland in NATO? Probably not, but they're next to Russia. I don't really know. Really anything. So between these two, I would probably go for the first one because let's take a look at the second one. The United States should substantially increase its economic engagement in the Western Balkans. Sorry. The United States should isn't as specific, right? Like, are we talking about like how? Like through public policy, like laws? Or are we talking about like American companies should do this? What is economic engagement, right? We'll get there. But first, what is the United States? Is the United States the federal government? Is it the people in the United States? Is it organizations? That automatically makes it messier, and it's already hard to compare links that talk about different scenarios, and I feel like this just presents a lot more scenarios where the competing evidence is actually talking about different things with no way of resolving which one we should actually be evaluating. Substantial increase, that's fine. Economic engagement is a lot more broad, right? Like, does that mean bilateral trade? Does that can that mean just import? Can that mean just export? Does economic engagement even have to be legal economic engagement? Like, can you talk about, like, I don't know if they like have drugs or whatever, but like these are things that are, these are the neurons that are firing off, right? And Western Balkans, what is there like a former definition of the Western Balkans? Let's see. Why is this so small? Just show me the, okay. Yeah. Okay, so, there's a couple issues with this area as far as, like, debate stuff goes, which is that you're gonna have, like, 1 million back files from, not that the other topic won't have 1,000 back files, it will, but Greece, economy, that kind of thing, it's just been talked about to death, kind of, and I don't know, it just doesn't, it seems like we're going to be talking a lot about, like, the pandemic has hit this area really hard, and what we need to do is we need to invest in this. On the other side is going to say, like, yes, but foreign investment is actually a bad thing, because domestic investment is what they need, and foreign investment is actually what's shut out domestic investment. And the other side is going to say, but the existing foreign investment is the status quo, right? There's no scenario in which they blah 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 blah. It's the what was the, it wasn't a World Trade Organization topic, whatever. There was a topic recently. It's going to be that again, and I don't know. I just don't like econ topics. So I would go for the first one if I was voting, but hopefully I am giving you some idea with which you can make your own decision. Let's talk about Nocember. Option A, resolved, increased United States federal regulation of cryptocurrency transactions and or assets will produce more benefits than harms. So this is trying to go for like a value framing here. Not exactly, like, it doesn't say the word value, right? But it's talking about harm than good, but it's also talking about the harm versus good of a policy proposal. It's not like a does more harm than good. It's this thing that isn't happening right now would do more harm than good. So I'm not sure why it's phrased this way, which is another thing that I could better understand with that interview I want to do. Okay. Increase United States federal regulation. That's pretty clear, and I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of specific proposals for that. So that's good, right? That makes for better debates, because I mean, it makes not just for better debates, but it makes for a better topic. Like, part of the point of this is we're supposed to learn about these things. And if there's a set of specific proposals, or maybe some proposals we don't know as much about, and we can compare the efficacy of them, that's great education. So I like that. Cryptocurrency transactions, pretty clear. And or assets, sure, will produce more benefits than harms. I don't have any major problems with that. If I'm debating this topic, I probably want to be on the... Well, I think the major problem with it is that the links haven't really been tested. There's not that much precedence, as we talked about here, right? I mean, there might be some. I don't really keep up with the whole crypto thing, but what I would be looking for to better understand, do I like this topic, is what's the precedence? What regulations have been imposed? Are they enforceable? What have they done? Have those things been good, or have they been bad? That is going to significantly determine which side is more at advantage here. But what I would say is that both sides of this debate are going to have to come at it from the perspective of crypto is a really, really important thing that is going to be the future. Like, you just have to, because if you're defending, like, crypto is not that good, like, you're just going to get blown out of the water because there's no impact to... You're defending a really bad status quo. Crypto exists because there's problems to resolve. There's a question of whether cryptocurrency is resolving those problems effectively, but defending the status quo isn't going to get you very far. So the affirmative is going to have to say, hey, crypto is this really cool thing, but the lack of regulation right now is compromising its ability to be adopted in the ways and at the scale that we need to resolve the problems with our financial institutions. The negative is going to have to say, hey, crypto is going really well right now, and probably specifically because it's not very well regulated. The lack of regulations makes X, Y, and Z more accessible to developers and investors and whatever, and that's going to be really key. And that's going to be the main thing. Both sides are going to talk about, like, here's how crypto helps places, but it's really going to be a test of, like, precedence. And, like, for example, what is it, Colombia that just... El Salvador that just adopted Bitcoin as, like, an official currency? Like, does that come with regulations? Are those the kinds of regulations that we would be considering under this topic the United States doing? And then was there some sort of benefit or detriment to the crypto space as a result of that? Is probably what you are researching. Given that framing, I think the affirmative is probably at advantage here, largely because crypto is kind of in a bust right now. Who knows what it's going to be like in November of 2021. If crypto's up, then the status quo is good and you don't want to change it. If crypto's down, then the status quo is bad and you want to change it. In other words, if everything with crypto is going really well, investors are making money, new tech is happening, consumers are having a great time, then the negative is going to have a much easier time to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. What's going to help the affirmatives is if things are like they are right now. A bunch of crypto investors just lost a bunch of money, and that is probably because of or not helped by how erratic that market is. And that's probably the type of regulation, that's probably what your regulation should be seeking to address. But let's take a look at the other one. Resolve, the United States federal government should implement a central bank digital currency. I mean, no, is my guess. I'm guessing that there's a specific proposal for this. Let's find out. Release a research paper this summer. This will be out by then. Moves multiple countries, most prominently China, and the central bank digital currency space is. But why? Probably because of some China fifth Cold War trade situation. The effective functioning of our economy requires that people have faith and confidence not only in the dollar, but also in the payment networks, banks, and other payment services, provided that money flow on a daily basis. No. The reason why I think the first topic is a little bit stronger is because it's not clear what the United States federal government is doing with, like, what happens with other crypto in the context of this happening, right? I think that just opens a lot of doors for a lot of confusion and very little clash, because what is the negative going to go for? The negative is going to go for not crypto is bad, because again, like, the Fed is exploring this because the status quo is bad, and the negative can't win the debate without an alternative if the status quo is bad. I say can't. A lot of things happen in a debate round, but they're not prone to winning it, right? It's certainly not easier for them. So in a world where you are not saying that crypto is bad, you're saying crypto is good, but we shouldn't implement this specific thing, then what do you have to go for? Well, one option is an alternative, which is like, hey, we should, yeah, see, I don't know. Like, is there like a different version of a central bank digital currency that competes with the affirmative? Probably not. Like, alternatives would just be other cryptocurrencies, and the affirmative doesn't have to defend that they do something to other cryptocurrencies. So then the only real ground the negative has is that this is going to compromise the crypto market in some way, and you just don't have tested links on that. Maybe China is making some moves, but I just feel like it's going to be really hard to find clear evidence that shows that, not just shows that, but shows how implementing this affects this already incredibly volatile, incredibly difficult to understand and predict topic. So my pick here again would be the first one, but it's not just about me saying what the picks are. It's just talking a little bit about these topics. All right, January, drug policy, already a bad topic area. It's a bad topic area, but let's talk about why. Resolve: the United Nations should admit the nope, I skipped down. I was like, what? Resolved: the United States federal government should legalize all illicit drugs. Okay, so I mean, we've had this debate in parliamentary debate a lot, and it comes down. Here's the way the debate goes. The negative thinks, well, that would be bad, right? Because people would be able to do heroin and other bad drugs. And then you're like, well, we're already in a massive opioid epidemic. Like, people are doing heroin. It's like, oh, okay. Well, we wouldn't want it to get worse. And you're like, okay, but that's a linear disadvantage. That's a bad situation getting worse. So then the affirmative is like, cool, legalize it, regulate it. You get tax money, which is fine. That's probably a lot of impacts. But also, drug legalization means that a lot of targeted minority groups are no longer being, like, shoveled into prisons. It means that people can seek care for their drug addictions without having to worry about, let's say, violating their parole and getting life in prison, or just whatever legal repercussions, right? And the other thing is that the links have been tested in many places. Amsterdam and such have tested legalizing drugs, and shit generally got better. So the affirmative kind of has this. So then the negative has to be like, well, is there a proposed alternative that we could, and that would be decriminalizing all drugs. And then you get into the legalization versus decriminalization debate, and that's a decent debate to have, right? There's a lot in favor of legalization. For example, the whole tax thing. You can't really, like, build an industry around a not legal but technically decriminalized, like, industry. But the negative side of that is, like, do we want a drug industry to get even worse? Like, with, you know, like, the opioid epidemic exists because pharmaceutical companies created the problem in very intentional ways. And these are basically the same companies that, like, I mean, talk about, like, cigarette companies and companies that make opioids. And, like, do we want these people to now have this massive industry on their hands and full legal impunity to market it to whoever they want as aggressively and as immorally as they possibly can? That's a concern. But generally speaking, shit's bad, right? That's the first question is always, how's the status quo? And here the status quo is really, really bad. And that is why U.S. drug policy is a rough topic, because the status quo is horrible. And pretty much anything is worth a shot at this point. Makes it pretty hard for the negative to win. Let's see, the other one. In the United States, the benefits of drug courts outweigh the harms. I don't know a lot about drug courts. Term I've heard before, I'm sure. Drug courts. Drug courts are specialized court docket programs that target criminal defendants and offenders, juvenile offenders, and parents with pending child welfare cases. What? Give me the... Here we go. What? Drug courts are judiciary supervised court dockets that provide sentencing alternative of treatment combined with supervision for people living with serious substance abuse. Drug courts are problem-solving courts that... Oh, man. Okay. I mean, okay. Let's talk about what this topic has going well for it. It's not asking us to change the status quo, so it doesn't matter that the status quo is good or bad. It's a way of having the drug policy debate without it just immediately coming down to, well, the AF wins because the status quo sucks. In the choice between these, I'd probably pick the drug courts one. I can't. Well, what's the alternative? Prison? Like, that's the problem with some of these, like, more harm than good topics because it's not clear. Like, more harm than what? Like, okay, it's like the trolley problem, right? There's people, they're tied down on a track for whatever reason. They're workers on a track, and if a train is heading towards them, and you can flip a switch and divert the train from hitting the people, but if you do that, one person will die as opposed to 5 people. By the way, factually speaking, the ethically correct choice is to not flip the switch. But you can argue with me about that in the comments. Because if the 5 people die, that's not your fault. You didn't put those people there. You didn't put the train going that way. But if you do flip the switch, that one guy dying, that was your fault. And people are going to say inaction is action, and inaction has moral consequences. But I don't think you're really fully considering the implications of the statement inaction. Like, people are responsible for their inaction because there is a near infinite number of things that you are choosing not to act on, and that kind of makes the concept of morality irrelevant. Anyway, this whole thing is beside the point. Let's get back to it. But we're talking, like, is that the situation we're talking about? Like, okay, it's like, is it just the harm the drug courts are doing versus the benefits the drug courts are doing? Or is it the harms and benefits of drug courts against the hypothetical harms and benefits of a world without drug courts? Again, this happens with that one topic. I just did a round analysis on it. It's the harms or benefits of this, not the World Bank, whatever. They invest in stuff. I don't. That's what all those rounds, I'm sure, came down to. The round that I watched came down to that, and that's a messy thing in debate, in my opinion. But it's part of the framing debate, right? Like, you want to have a clear case for why your framing is the better one. With that having been said, I think people are going to be compelled to go with the legalize all illicit drugs because it's on its face. Well, it's a lot easier to, like, it's a lot more talked about. There's a lot of precedents. There's really easy to understand and digest arguments, but I'd rather be the AF on that topic. And on the second topic, I don't have a clear side preference because I don't really know the issue that well. Unless it's like, unless I think a lot of my rounds are going to be as opposed to going to prison. And if I can't win that framing where I'm like, no, it's like the good things they do versus the bad things they do. We don't get to evaluate what someone else would or would not do if they didn't exist. If it's that, then I'll pick the second one. If we have to imagine what the world would look like without them, evaluate the harms and benefits of that separately and this thing separately, get the net benefits of each and then compare those, like that, I don't want to have that debate personally. Let's move on. February. International organizations. It's a little vague for a topic area, but I guess you didn't know. You didn't want to pick crypto because who knows what's going to happen by February. I get it. Okay, resolve. The United Nations should admit the Republic of Somaliland as a member state. Sure. What's the other one? On balance, Turkey's membership is beneficial to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Okay, let's talk about the second one first. It's the same issue, right? Like, when we're talking about Turkey's membership being beneficial, are we saying there's harms of it being in NATO, there's benefits to it being in NATO, and when evaluating the impacts of that on net, it's beneficial or harmful? Or are we saying if Turkey was not in NATO, here's what it would look like, and now that it is in NATO, here's what it looks like, and which of those is better? The one where we're considering if Turkey wasn't in NATO is a little bit of a shit show, because you're going to find a lot of evidence that's talking about, like, kicking Turkey out of NATO. That makes for a really messy debate because there's a lot of, like, implications and immediate consequences to that are not existing in the world where we're not kicking Turkey out, right? That causes links to be generated, causes things to happen, causes impacts to happen. And it's hard to compare that to a world where we're just evaluating the status quo. The other issue there is that there is no mechanism in NATO's charter that describes, like, getting rid of a state. Like, once you're in NATO, you are NATO. There's a lot of procedure for getting someone in. There is no procedure for getting someone out, which, if I'm in it, I would argue, if I'm in this debate, I would argue that's a pretty good reason why we're not comparing the world to if Turkey wasn't a part of NATO, because that's not even a legally approachable scenario. That can't happen. Now, realistically, it probably can't. Like, they'll figure something out, right? And remove Turkey from NATO. I'm sure there's proposals for it. Oh, hey, it's legally possible, apparently, since the last time. So what do I know? But yeah, I don't, I'm not terribly compelled by that. So let's go to the other one, which is Somaliland. Sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's, I often forget that, like, College LD has one topic all year. Public Forum has, if you go to tournaments for every topic, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 topics for the whole year. In parliamentary debate, you'll do 7 topics at each tournament on average. That's averaging breaking and not breaking, right? Like, if I'm prepping my team out, not to brag, I mean, there's also, like, a novice division or whatever. Like, I'm getting one team at least to semifinals every tournament. And if there's, let's see, 6 prelims and you start at octos, that's 9 rounds that tournament. And you do that like every other weekend all year. So in a year, and you know, they want to avoid recently used topics. So in parliamentary debate, you end up debating easily 100 topics each year, depending on how active you are and so on. So with that said, like, yeah, we debated this. We debated this for Scotland. We debated this for where's Barcelona? Catalonia. We debated it for a couple other places, and I don't know anything about Somaliland, but here's what I'm guessing that debate looks like without knowing anything about Somaliland. Hey, there's a separatist movement in Somaliland, and they want to be. Where is that? I want to say. I was gonna say South Africa. Is it? Nope, it is not. It is in. Okay, it's part of Somalia. Okay, so hey, there's this area in Somalia that is Kurdistan. That's another one that we debated like a million times. There's an area in Somalia called Somaliland. They have a distinct culture. Maybe they even have their own like regional dialect or language. And there's some kind of like colonialist shit going on. And they want to be independent. But they carry a major part of the Somali economy where it incentivizes Somalia to not want to kind of let them go. But additionally, even though they have a government in like an unofficial government in place, right? They have like leaders and whatever. There's question as to how effectively they're going to be able to organize and whether the international community would accept them. This is where the debate gets a little bit messy because a lot of the articles you will read are going to be, like, for example, a lot of the topics that we had were about, like, Spain giving Catalonia independence. But a lot of the articles talking about this are talking about what would happen if Catalonia just became independent despite Spain, like not without their support, and all of the things that would happen to their economy and blah blah blah. But it's less clear, like, okay, but those wouldn't happen if Spain is the one saying, like, here, like, you can become your own country. In other words, it's a question of how durable fiat is. We have a short video on fiat which explains what it is, and the question of how durable fiat is if we're saying, like, if the resolution is let's say we were in the Trump days and the resolution was the United States federal government should end construction on the border wall. Could the negative say, okay, even if you pass this, Trump is just going to find another way or just going to build it again? Because the resolution says the United States federal government is going to do this, Trump would be in, like, he has the ability to veto it. He's a part of the federal government in this scenario. So what you'd be saying is, let's imagine Trump, like, approves of this law to get rid of the wall and then builds the wall again, and that makes all of the political scenarios really hard to discern. So here we're saying the United Nations should admit the Republic of Somaliland. Well, what does that mean? Like, is it unanimously? Are the people that are currently against it still against it? What are we imagining exactly? Because that is going to determine the viability of Somaliland existing as an independent state. Additionally, pretty much every separatist movement has a lot of nationalism in it, and that nationalism tends to be generally speaking right-wing and generally speaking kind of shitty in a lot of ways. So there could be some issues with some of these groups that are pushing for Somaliland separatism. With that said, I'd still rather have that debate because that's the debate. I'm gonna read about those things. I'm gonna learn about those things. I'm gonna come up with an informed position on the benefits and the detriments of it. On the other hand, the Turkey stuff, I think it's a clearer topic. I think it has cleaner evidence, but I just dislike topics that are like does more harm than good, but actually we're talking about the harm and good maybe versus the harm and good if it didn't exist, and it's kind of like this like trolley situation. I just think that's really messy, and it makes for worse debates. Okay, March. How are we doing? I gotta leave in like 20 minutes. We'll keep going. We'll go as far as I can go. Resolve. The United States should substantially increase its investment in carbon capture technology. What's the neg to that? I mean, that's the other thing. Like, environment, it's really rough for the negative. Carbon capture technology is like an informative speech we ran 3 or 4 years ago. It's like, what's the downside? It doesn't compete with alternatives, right? Like, yeah, no, bad topic. Okay. I mean, it's a great way to get a, if you're the NSDA and you're like, what do we want a nation worth of students to learn about? Carbon capture technology is a great choice. But if I'm about to debate this and I'm a competitive player of a competitive game, that's not a topic I want. Like, if I'm striking topics in a debate format that does that, I'm going to strike this one. Unless I'm the affirmative, in which case, yeah, give me the, especially if the other side's not around. I mean, what counterplan would you even run? So, like, what's some sort of, like, oh, maybe it's not that effective. Maybe it incentivizes people to be more wasteful, and maybe there's a better alternative. The answers to which are, who cares if it's effective or not? It's better than the status quo. The status quo sucks. I don't know if you've been outside recently, but I think 2 days ago, California set the record for the highest temperature ever recorded on Earth. Like real talk, like we're like past the point of like things ever being okay. Like millions of people are gonna die within a few years. It's gonna get really bad. The incentivizing people to blah blah blah, like, it's too late. Like, who cares? Like, we're already, the best argument for carbon capture is like we're past the tipping point. Anybody who's not saying that remember when COVID was happening and no one wanted to say pandemic? Like, that's what's happening with the environment. Like, once people aren't willing to engage with problems mentally unless they know there's a solution. Like, we just, as human creatures, if there is a problem and we don't have a solution to it, we deny that there is a problem rather than live with the knowledge that there's a horrible problem and no way to fix it. So anyway, carbon capture aims to reverse global warming by taking carbon out of, well, I mean, it's too late in a lot of ways, right? You're not going to freeze the ice back in Antarctica, but every other measure of like just decreasing output is, even if you put it at zero output of carbon, like, it's too late. So the only way is to remove carbon out of the atmosphere, which is what carbon capture technology is all about. So again, like, why am I getting a phone call? Oh my god, leave me alone. Okay. Sorry about that. Ah, now I'm blurry. Alright, I'll finish this up. Yes. Great. And the answer to some alternatives exist is that it's not competitive. Investing in carbon capture doesn't prevent us from investing $1 trillion in whatever else you want to invest in. And no, the affirmative doesn't have to explain where the money comes from. So with that said, let's just examine what the next topic is. resolved in the United States, the benefits of increasing organic agriculture outweighs the harms. Great topic. Organic agriculture is pretty, and it is good for you, but it's also not all that sustainable. There's huge sustainability concerns for like organic agriculture. It takes a lot more resources. It takes a lot more land. Yeah, the Industrial Revolution sucked and it reduced like the quality of our food and all of that stuff, but there's a reason why like mass human population became possible through the Industrial Revolution, and trying to reverse that, albeit with better technology and better resources and whatever. I'm not saying the app is screwed here. It might not be that easy, right? And in the United States, it definitely makes it more competitive, but there's just like, you know, you can't feed the world using organic agriculture. There's just too many people. There's too much demand for food. So in the United States, it's pretty competitive. I would, if I'm the affirmative, talk about a lot of preventable diseases, healthcare, obesity, diabetes, that kind of thing. That just comes down to the quality of diet and so on. Food deserts, accessibility to quality meals, that kind of stuff. That's all bread and butter. Pretty good. Maybe some cool technology that wasn't available before that people don't know about. If I'm the negative, I'm going to talk about that it's not sustainable, and talking about even if you subsidize it, the overall cost of production is going to go up. We just don't have that much land. And like, what does organic agriculture mean in terms of like animal agriculture? Like, I see organic tags on like my chicken. And does that mean that factory farming is no longer a thing? Is that part of the debate? Or are we just talking about plant agriculture? Interesting topic, fair to both sides, and it's not super clear that the status quo is like very good or very bad. So seems like a good topic. Let's see. I'll leave the nationals topic. Let's or maybe, I don't know, whatever. I'll see if I have time. April, the People's Republic of China. I believe that's Taiwan. The People's Republic of China should substantially decrease its... No, that's Republic of China is Taiwan. The People's Republic of China is China. Should substantially decrease its control of state-owned enterprises. What is it? First of all, what does that mean? Will they still be state-owned, or will they decrease their control of it? I don't know what that means. Secondly, like, what's the... I don't know. What, like... What's the neg? Yeah, I don't know about that topic. I'd have to read. Maybe there's some really great clash there, and China is expanding better and faster and more effectively than anywhere else in the world, and that is due to the state-owned enterprises, which have cut out a lot of these problems that exist in the United States, for example, but they don't have those barriers or those hoops to jump through or blah, 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 blah. Look how fast they can build a hotel. It's just a question of whether the status quo is good or bad in China. That's what it comes down to. If the status quo is good in China, the negative wins. If the status quo is bad in China, the affirmative wins. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to debate than whether the status quo is good or not. But let's just say one side will have a much easier time preparing. What's the alternative? Resolve, Japan should revise Article 9 of its constitution to develop offensive military capabilities. It is a much better topic. Yeah, I'm going to save you a lot of trouble. Go for the second one. Japan doesn't have a military. It has a police force, which is basically a military. And they're not a nuclear-armed nation, but from what I've heard, they basically have the ability to go nuclear anytime they want to. Like, they have the infrastructure, they've just decided not to for a lot of good reasons. And so if I'm the negative, I would probably talk a lot about nuke stuff, arms races, miscalculation, that kind of thing. But also, like, it's gonna come down to South China Sea stuff, like China is being super aggressive and blah 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 blah. Now, in the status quo, Japan and the United States have a defense agreement, which is why they don't have a military, because we are committed with our military to basically be their military. But the Trump administration especially, though there's other reasons and other movements within Japan, has called into question our willingness and ability to do that. Generally speaking, if you can show that there is some alternative to the world becoming more militarized, that's probably a good thing. Especially with nukes, because nukes are very, 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 very easy to build. I say that like I can build one, but in the grand scheme of things, compared to how easy they are to get rid of. And I don't just mean physically disposing of, which it is very difficult to physically dispose of, but I also mean like politically. Right, it's like you kind of can't put Pandora back in the box, as they say. Lastly, sure, we got a couple minutes. National tournament. Let's see, trade. I hate it already. Resolve: the United States should establish a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan. That's funny, because I'm pretty sure the NSDA wants to expand it to China, and I don't know how they would feel about a topic acknowledging that Taiwan is a country. But I can't wait to see if the NSDA backpedals on this one. Sure, the United States should establish a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement with Taiwan. Obvious negative to this is China backlash. There's no real clear indication of is the status quo really good, is the status quo really bad. China's been much more aggressive towards China recently, or China's been aggressive towards Taiwan recently, so that probably leads to some non-econ advantages. Seems like a pretty good topic. On balance, the benefits of the comprehensive and progressive agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership outweigh the harms of the TPP. Listen, I've prepped the TPP topics like 6 times, and for the life of me, I don't remember what it is 5 minutes after every one of those rounds. I'm going to say go with the first one, right? It's econ if you want to just argue that, but there's more to it than just that. And maybe public forum hasn't been talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We were debating that at Northern California Championships in February of 2020. The last in-person tournament I went to. So, I don't know. It kind of feels old hat for me, and we looked into it. I don't know. And again, there's the issue of when you say more harm outweigh the harms, are we comparing that to a world in which it didn't exist? Or are we saying, look, it exists. We're not saying let's not imagine it doesn't exist. Like, a thing can be causing harm and be more harmful than its alternatives, right? Like if me being in this room means that there's a bear mauling me, but if I leave the room, it's just covered in lava and I die instantly, doesn't mean that the bear is doing good for me. It's still doing more harm than it is doing good. But you're right. Also, the alternative is, I read a lot of like Schopenhauer and like stuff like that, and like I don't. Most things aren't good. Like, frankly, like nothing is good. Nothing's going well, and probably nothing will ever be actually good in the world. Good news is you got art, and you can do cool stuff while you're here. With that said, I just think a lot of these topics, like, set a weird burden, like, will this make everyone happy finally? And it's like, no, that's not, people aren't capable of that. Got real dark at the end there. My point being, I just feel that these on balance, harms and benefits, whatever debates leave the realm of available evidence very quickly, because we very quickly leave what is happening, how much of it is good, how much of it is bad, which is how the topic is phrased and how it should be evaluated. And instead, we're jumping very quickly to, well, if it didn't exist, here's what would exist, but I'm not running a plan, and I'm running perception links, but I don't have any evidence for it, and I don't know who would do it or how, and I can't fiat any of it, but I'm just going to say it. And I talked pretty, and you didn't respond to it, and so now I win. Like, it just... It's not how the debate should go in my mind, but there's not a useful enough mechanism to stop the debate from going there. So I figure you got a chance to avoid that, so you should take it. But these are just my opinions. And my first look. Again, I haven't really delved into any of these. I don't have any great strategies in mind for any of these. But if you are looking at this and you wanted my take on it, which if you do, great, you have it. But maybe, I don't know, people don't comment on our videos. I think you should. Like, I'm around. Tell me what you think. Like, where am I wrong? Which topics did you like the most? Which ones did you like the least? Let's talk about it. And what am I missing? Yeah, cool. You've been great. I've been Sasan. Peace out. Bye.